Late nights in suburbia have their own soundtrack. The hum of the refrigerator downstairs, the occasional car passing on Maple Street, and the soft glow of phone screens in darkened bedrooms. I'd grown accustomed to all of it over the past 15 years of marriage, but lately there was something new in the mix. The sound of my wife Alison's thumb frantically scrolling through her phone at midnight. I'm Jack Morrison, 42 years old, and I make my living as a data broker for insurance companies. It's not glamorous work, but it pays well, and more importantly, it's taught me to recognize patterns. In my line of work, patterns tell stories. A sudden spike in medical claims might indicate fraud. Unusual spending patterns could reveal insurance scams. And the way my wife had been tilting her phone screen away from me for the past 3 months, that was a pattern too. "Who's texting you this late?" I asked one Thursday night, not looking up from my laptop where I was reviewing claim data for a workers' compensation case. "Just work stuff," Alison replied, her voice carrying that particular tone people use when they're not quite lying, but aren't telling the truth either. "You know how crazy things have been since I got promoted to HR director." I did know. Alison had landed the position at Meridian Industries 6 months ago, and it came with longer hours, more responsibility, and apparently a lot more late-night text messages. She'd explained away the increased phone activity as part of her new recruiting responsibilities. "I can't delete Tinder," she told me 2 weeks earlier when I jokingly asked why she was always on her phone. "I'm looking for new employees for my job." I didn't argue. I just stayed quiet and made a mental note. You see, I've worked with enough HR departments to know that legitimate recruiting happens on LinkedIn, Indeed, and specialized job boards. Not on dating apps, but I also knew that confronting someone mid-lie rarely produces truth. It just produces better lies. So I watched, and I noticed things. Like how she'd developed a habit of taking her phone into the bathroom for 20-minute showers. How she'd started working late 3 nights a week, always on the same days. How she'd bought new lingerie but hadn't worn any of it for me. How she'd suddenly become interested in going to the gym, something she'd avoided for years. The pattern was becoming clear, but I needed proof. In my business, suspicions don't pay the bills. Evidence does. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday morning in October. Alison had rushed out the door for an early meeting, leaving her phone charging on the kitchen counter. She'd never done that before. Ever. In 15 years of marriage, that phone had been surgically attached to her hand. I stood there for a full minute, staring at the device like it might explode. The ethical part of my brain reminded me that checking someone's phone without permission was a violation of trust. The practical part of my brain reminded me that trust had already been violated. I was just looking for documentation. The phone buzzed. A text message appeared on the lock screen. "Miss you, sweetheart. When can we repeat that hot night?" The sender was listed as Derek Work. I took a photo of the screen with my own phone, then sat down at the kitchen table and did what I do best. I started gathering data. Alison used the same password for everything. Test 2004, our daughter's name and birth year. It took me less than 5 minutes to access her cloud backup and download 6 months' worth of text messages, call logs, and app data. What I found was worse than just an affair. Derek Hoffman wasn't just some random guy she'd met on Tinder. He was the procurement director at her company, and their relationship went far beyond romantic. The text messages revealed a web of vendor kickbacks, fraudulent hiring approvals, and contract manipulation that made my wife's infidelity look like a parking ticket compared to federal fraud charges. But it was the personal messages that hit hardest. "Jack is so boring. He just sits there with his spreadsheets all night." "When are you going to leave him?" "Soon. I just need to make sure I get half of everything first." I printed everything, 6 months of evidence, organized by date and cross-referenced with her work calendar. By the time I finished, I had a stack of papers 3 inches thick and a plan. I drove to my lawyer's office and spent 2 hours explaining the situation to Bennett Walsh, a divorce attorney who specialized in high-asset cases involving fraud. He listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. "This is actually helpful," he said when I finished. "The fraud angle gives us leverage for asset protection. We can argue that marital funds were at risk due to her criminal activity." "How long will it take to prepare the papers?" "I can have them ready by tomorrow afternoon." That night, I made dinner like always. Grilled chicken, steamed vegetables, and rice. Alison came home at 8:30, claiming she'd been in meetings all day. She kissed my cheek and asked about my day like she had for thousands of nights before. "Same old spreadsheets," I said, echoing her text message to Derek. "You know how it is." She smiled and nodded, then spent the rest of the evening on her phone, occasionally giggling at messages I now knew weren't from work colleagues. I went to bed early and slept better than I had in months. The next morning, I woke up at 6, made coffee, and placed the divorce papers on the kitchen table next to Alison's favorite mug. I attached a handwritten note. Now I can use Tinder to find a new wife. Then I sat down with my own coffee and waited. Alison stumbled into the kitchen at 7:15, already running late for work. She was wearing the navy blue dress she'd bought last month, the one she claimed was for important client meetings, but had actually worn to 3 separate hotel rendezvous with Derek, according to her credit card statements. She grabbed her mug without looking, started toward the coffee pot, then stopped. I watched her face change as she processed what she was seeing: the official legal documents, the county courthouse seal, her name listed as respondent in bold letters. "What is this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Divorce papers," I said, taking a sip of my coffee. I figured it was time to make things official. Her hand shook as she picked up the note. "Jack, I don't understand. What's this about Tinder?" "You tell me. You're the one who said you couldn't delete it because you needed it for work." The color drained from her face. I was just what? Just lying to your husband's face? Just screwing your coworker? Just committing federal procurement fraud?" She sat down heavily in the chair across from me, the divorce papers scattered in front of her like evidence at a crime scene. "How long have you known?" she asked. "About Derek? About 6 hours? About the kickback scheme? About 5 hours? About you being a lying, cheating criminal?" That took a little longer to sink in. Tears started flowing down her cheeks, but I felt nothing. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't just break your heart. It breaks your capacity to care about the person who broke it. "Jack, please let me explain. It's not what you think. Really. Because what I think is that you've been having an affair with Derek Hoffman for 6 months, using your position to approve fraudulent vendor contracts, and planning to divorce me as soon as you figured out how to steal half my assets. Am I wrong about any of that?" She opened her mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. "How did you—" "I'm a data broker, Alison. I find patterns for a living. And you? You've been following a very obvious pattern." I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshot of Derek's text message. Her face went white. "You went through my phone? You left it here yesterday morning, with that message right there on the lock screen. After that, I just followed the data trail." "Jack, I know this looks bad, but you don't understand the pressure I've been under at work. Derek was helping me navigate the corporate politics, and things just developed." "Into procurement fraud? What are you talking about?" I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a folder containing printouts of her text messages with Derek. I spread them across the table like a poker player revealing a royal flush. "Meridian Contract MC4471, Janitorial Services, Derek's cousin's company. Approved by you despite being 40% higher than the lowest bid. You got a $2,000 consulting fee that same week." Her mouth fell open. "Meridian Contract MC4502, Office Supplies, another Derek connection, another fee. Should I keep going?" "How do you know about the consulting fees?" "Bank records, Alison. You deposited the checks into our joint savings account. I've been looking at those statements for months, wondering where the extra money was coming from. I thought maybe you'd gotten a raise." She buried her face in her hands. "Oh, God." "The good news is that I've already moved our legitimate assets into a protected account. The bad news is that you're about to become unemployable in any compliance-related field, and probably any field that requires a background check." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've already contacted the FBI's procurement fraud hotline. They're very interested in the vendor relationships at Meridian Industries." Alison's head snapped up. "You called the FBI?" "Yesterday afternoon. They said they'd been watching some irregularities in federal contracts at your company. Apparently my information was exactly what they needed to move forward with an investigation." "Jack, you can't do this to me. We can work this out. We can go to counseling. I'll end things with Derek." "You're right about one thing," I said, standing up and putting on my jacket. "You will end things with Derek, because by the end of the week, you'll both be fired, and by the end of the month, you'll both be under federal investigation." "Where are you going?" "To work. Some of us still have legitimate jobs." I paused at the kitchen door and looked back at her. She was sitting there in her navy blue dress, mascara running down her cheeks, surrounded by the evidence of her own stupidity. "Oh, and Alison? You might want to call Derek and give him a heads up. I hear federal investigations can be pretty stressful, especially when you're guilty." I drove to work in a strange state of calm. For months, I'd felt like I was losing my mind, questioning my own perceptions while watching my marriage disintegrate in slow motion. Now that I had answers, the anxiety had been replaced by something much more useful: cold, calculating anger. My office at Consolidated Data Services occupies the 3rd floor of a converted warehouse downtown. It's not glamorous, but it suits the work. Insurance fraud investigation requires patience, attention to detail, and the ability to see connections that others miss. Skills that, as it turned out, translated perfectly to uncovering marital fraud. I spent the morning working on legitimate cases, but my mind kept drifting to the investigation I'd started at home. By lunch, I'd made a decision. If I was going to destroy my wife's life, I was going to do it thoroughly and systematically. I called my old friend Mike Rodriguez, who runs a private investigation firm specializing in corporate security. "Jack Morrison," he said when he answered. "What's it been, 2 years?" "About that. Listen, Mike, I need a favor. A big one." "What's going on?" I explained the situation, leaving out the emotional details and focusing on the facts. Mike listened without interruption, occasionally asking clarifying questions about timelines and evidence. "So, you want me to investigate your wife and her boyfriend? I want you to investigate the entire network. Derek didn't come up with this scheme by himself, and Alison isn't smart enough to have orchestrated it. There's someone else involved." "What makes you think that?" "Pattern analysis. The vendor relationships are too sophisticated for a mid-level HR director and a procurement guy who's only been with the company for 8 months. Someone with deeper institutional knowledge is running this operation." Mike was quiet for a moment. "You know this is going to get expensive, right? And messy. Corporate fraud investigations have a way of expanding beyond the original scope." "How expensive?" "For what you're describing. Probably 15 to 20,000, maybe more if we find what I think we're going to find." "Do it." "Jack, are you sure about this? Once we start pulling threads, we can't put them back." "Mike, my wife has been lying to my face for 6 months while stealing from her company and planning to divorce me. The threads are already pulled. I just want to see how far this thing goes." "Okay. I'll need copies of everything you've collected so far, plus access to any financial records you can legally provide. I'll email you everything tonight." "One more thing, Jack. What's your end game here? Are you looking for evidence for the divorce, or are you trying to send people to prison?" "Why can't it be both?" That afternoon, I received a text message from Alison. "Jack, please call me. We need to talk." I deleted it without responding. An hour later, another message. "I know you're angry, but we can fix this." I deleted that one too. By 5 o'clock, she'd sent 12 messages, each one more desperate than the last. The final one read, "Derek says you're bluffing about the FBI. He says you don't have any real evidence." That message I kept, because it told me everything I needed to know about how they were handling the situation. Instead of coming clean, instead of trying to minimize the damage, they were doubling down, which meant they were about to make this much worse for themselves. I drove home at my usual time, stopping at the grocery store to buy ingredients for dinner. If Alison wanted to pretend this was a normal marriage dispute, I was happy to play along. For now. She was waiting in the living room when I walked in, still wearing the navy blue dress but with fresh makeup covering the evidence of her earlier breakdown. "Jack, thank God you're home. We really need to talk about this morning." "Sure," I said, carrying the grocery bags into the kitchen. "What would you like to talk about?" This whole misunderstanding. I think you've gotten the wrong impression about my relationship with Derek." I started unpacking groceries, arranging items on the counter with deliberate precision. "What impression should I have gotten?" "It's complicated. Yes, we've become close, but it's not what you think. It's more of an emotional connection than a physical one." "Emotional connection?" I repeated. "Is that what you call it when he texts you about hot nights?" That was taken out of context. What context makes "I can't wait to taste you again" appropriate between coworkers? She was quiet for a long moment. "Okay, maybe we crossed some lines. But it's not an affair, Jack. Not really." I turned to look at her. "Alison, I have 6 months of text messages, hotel receipts, and credit card statements. I have photos you sent him that I really wish I could unsee. I have detailed discussions about your plans to leave me. What exactly would constitute an affair in your definition?" "Those photos were we were just playing around." "Playing around with federal procurement contracts too?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't." I pulled out my phone and showed her a screenshot of one of her text conversations with Derek. "The Morrison Group contract is approved. Your cut is in the usual account." Her face went pale again. "Where did you get that?" "From your phone, Alison. The phone you left here yesterday morning with all your secrets unlocked." "You had no right." "I had every right. We're married. Joint assets, joint liability. When you commit crimes using resources from our marriage, it becomes my business." She sat down at the kitchen table, her hands shaking. "Jack, I think I need a lawyer." "I think you need several lawyers, a criminal defense attorney, an employment lawyer, and probably a bankruptcy attorney." "What do you mean?" I mean that by tomorrow morning, your company's board of directors will have copies of everything I found. By tomorrow afternoon, you'll be fired. By next week, you'll be under federal investigation, and by next month, you'll be unemployable. You can't do this to me. I'm not doing anything to you, Alison. I'm just making sure the right people have access to information about crimes that were committed using our joint resources. What about Tess? What about our daughter? Have you thought about how this will affect her? That stopped me cold. Tess was a sophomore at State University, majoring in business and completely unaware that her mother was a criminal. What about her? She'll be humiliated. Her friends will see this in the news. It'll ruin her college experience. You should have thought about that before you decided to become a felon. Jack, please, I'm begging you. I'll do anything. I'll end things with Derek. I'll quit my job. I'll sign any divorce agreement you want. Just don't destroy my life. I looked at her sitting there in her expensive dress in the kitchen of the house I'd been paying for, begging me not to expose crimes she'd committed while planning to leave me. Your life was destroyed the moment you decided to betray your family and steal from your company. I'm just making sure everyone else knows about it. So that's it? 15 years of marriage and you're just going to throw it all away? I'm not throwing anything away, Alison. You already threw it away. I'm just cleaning up the mess. The next morning, I woke up to find Alison's side of the bed empty. I could hear her on the phone downstairs, her voice high and panicked. I got dressed and went to the kitchen, where she was pacing back and forth while talking to someone who was clearly not making her feel better. No, Derek, you don't understand. He has everything. Text messages, bank records, contract information, everything. I poured myself coffee and sat down to listen. What do you mean, deny everything? He has screenshots. There was a long pause. You're not listening to me. This isn't just about the affair anymore. He knows about the contracts, the consulting fees, all of it. Another pause, longer this time. Don't you dare try to blame this on me. This was your idea, your scheme. I just signed the paperwork you told me to sign. I smiled. Nothing like a little pressure to reveal the true nature of a relationship. Fine. Do whatever you want. But when the FBI shows up at your office, don't call me. She hung up and turned around to find me sitting there with my coffee. Trouble in paradise? I asked. Derek thinks you're bluffing. He says you won't actually go through with reporting us because it would hurt Tess. Derek doesn't know me very well. Jack, I'm serious. If you do this, it won't just hurt me. It'll hurt our daughter, your parents, everyone who cares about us. Our daughter will be fine. She's strong and she's smart, and she'll figure out how to handle having a criminal for a mother. As for everyone else, they'll get over it. Alison sat down across from me, her eyes red from crying. What if I told you there was more to this? What if Derek wasn't the only one involved? I'm listening. There's someone else, someone higher up in the company who's been running this whole operation. Who? I can't tell you that. Not unless you promise to work with me instead of destroying me. I leaned back in my chair. Alison, you're not in a position to negotiate. You're facing federal charges, unemployment, and divorce. The only question is whether you make it worse by continuing to lie. I'm not lying. Derek and I were just following orders. Whose orders? She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. Janet Morrison. The name hit me like a physical blow. Janet Morrison was the senior vice president of operations at Meridian Industries. She was also my cousin. Janet? My cousin Janet? She's the one who recruited Derek. She's the one who told him to get close to me. She's the one who's been directing which contracts to approve and which vendors to use. Why would Janet do that? Because she's been embezzling from the company for years, and she needed people in procurement and HR to help cover her tracks. I felt the world shift slightly off its axis. How long have you known this? Since the beginning, she approached me right after I got the job. Said she could help me succeed, but I'd need to be a team player. And the affair with Derek? That was real. That part wasn't planned. But Janet encouraged it because she said it would make us more committed to keeping each other's secrets. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at our quiet suburban street. Our neighbors were getting ready for work, walking their dogs, living their normal lives, while my world collapsed in increasingly complex ways. How much money are we talking about? I don't know exactly. Janet has been doing this for at least 3 years. Derek thinks it's probably over $2 million. $2 million. Jack, if you report this, Janet will make sure Derek and I take the fall for everything. She has the power to destroy the evidence that points to her and make it look like we were the masterminds. So what are you suggesting? Work with us. Help us gather evidence against Janet. In exchange, Derek and I will testify against her, and maybe we can all get immunity deals. I turned around to look at her. You want me to help you commit more crimes to cover up the crimes you've already committed? I want you to help me survive this. Why should I? Because I'm still your wife. Because we have a daughter together. Because 15 years has to count for something. 15 years does count for something, Alison. It counts as 15 years of trust that you destroyed for money and sex. Jack, please. No. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to give me every piece of evidence you have about Janet's operation. Documents, text messages, bank records, everything. Then you're going to call the FBI and arrange to turn yourself in as a cooperating witness. And if I don't? Then I'll report what I know. Janet will probably escape prosecution, and you and Derek will spend the next 5 to 10 years in federal prison. You're really going to do this to family? Janet stopped being family the moment she recruited my wife into a criminal conspiracy, and you stopped being my wife the moment you said yes. Alison stared at me for a long moment, then pulled out her phone. I need to make some calls. Make them fast. I'm meeting with the FBI tomorrow morning, with or without your cooperation. As she walked out of the kitchen, I realized that my simple plan for revenge had just become something much more complicated. But I also realized that I didn't care. Alison, Derek, Janet, they'd all made their choices. Now they could live with the consequences. The FBI field office in downtown Cleveland looks exactly like what you'd expect from a federal building, imposing, sterile, and designed to make visitors feel small and nervous. I arrived at 9 a.m. sharp, carrying 2 briefcases full of evidence and a recording device containing Alison's confession from the night before. Special Agent Sarah Chen met me in the lobby. She was younger than I'd expected, probably mid-30s, with a kind of sharp intelligence that made me understand why she'd been assigned to financial crimes. Mr. Morrison, I'm Agent Chen. Thank you for coming in. She led me to a conference room where another agent, an older man introduced as Agent Williams, was waiting with a laptop and a stack of legal pads. Before we begin, Agent Chen said, I want to make sure you understand that this conversation is being recorded, and anything you tell us may be used in a federal investigation and prosecution. I understand. Good. Now, walk us through what you discovered, starting from the beginning. I spent the next 3 hours laying out the entire conspiracy, the affair between Alison and Derek, the fraudulent contract approvals, the kickback payments, and finally, Janet's role as the mastermind behind the operation. Agent Williams took notes while Agent Chen asked detailed questions about timelines, evidence sources, and the relationships between the various participants. This is quite extensive, Agent Chen said when I finished. How long did it take you to compile all this information? About a week of intensive investigation, but I'd been noticing patterns for months. And your wife is willing to cooperate with our investigation? She recorded a full confession last night. She's also prepared to provide access to her communications with both Derek and Janet. Agent Williams looked up from his notes. What about Derek Hoffman and Janet Morrison? Have they been contacted about this investigation? Not by me, but Alison spoke with Derek yesterday, and he seemed to think I was bluffing about involving federal authorities. What about Janet Morrison? As far as I know, she has no idea that anyone is aware of her involvement. Agent Chen and Agent Williams exchanged glances. Mr. Morrison, Agent Chen said, we're going to need you to do something for us, something that might be uncomfortable. What? We want you to wear a wire to the company's quarterly board meeting next week. Janet Morrison will be there, along with Derek Hoffman and several other executives. We need recorded evidence of their knowledge and participation in the fraud scheme. You want me to go undercover? Nothing that dramatic. You'll be attending as Alison's spouse, which you've done before. We just want you to guide conversations in directions that might prompt admissions. What if they suspect something? Based on what you've told us, they have no reason to think you're anything more than a betrayed husband focused on his divorce. They won't see you as a threat to their criminal operation. Agent Williams leaned forward. Mr. Morrison, I want to be clear about something. This investigation is going to destroy several lives, including your wife's. Are you prepared for that? Agent Williams, my wife destroyed her own life when she decided to commit federal crimes. I'm just making sure she doesn't destroy mine in the process. Fair enough. I left the FBI office with a recording device disguised as a pen and instructions for the following week's operation. On the drive home, I called Mike Rodriguez to update him on the situation. Jesus, Jack, when you said it was going to get messy, I didn't think you meant federal conspiracy charges. Neither did I, but here we are. What do you need from me? Keep investigating Derek's background. The FBI is focused on the financial crimes, but I want to know everything about this guy who's been sleeping with my wife. Already on it. And Jack, I found something interesting about Derek's employment history. What? He's been fired from 2 previous jobs for ethics violations. Sexual harassment at one company, expense account fraud at another. So he's a professional scumbag. Looks that way. I'll have a full report by tomorrow. That evening, I sat in my home office, reviewing the evidence one more time. Alison was upstairs, packing clothes into suitcases. She'd decided to stay at her sister's house until the investigation was complete. "Jack," she called from the top of the stairs. "Can we talk for a minute?" "What about?" "About what happens next. About Tess. About us." I walked to the bottom of the stairs and looked up at her. She was holding a framed photo of our family from Tess's high school graduation, taken just 2 years ago when we were still pretending to be happy. "There is no us, Alison. There's you, facing federal charges, and there's me, trying to rebuild my life after 15 years of marriage to someone I apparently never knew." "I know you hate me right now." "I don't hate you. Hate requires caring about someone. I don't care about you anymore." "What about Tess? What about her?" "She's going to need both of her parents to get through this." "She'll have one parent. Me, you'll be in federal prison." "Jack, please. The FBI said if I cooperate fully, I might get probation instead of prison time." "Then you better cooperate fully." "I am. I'm giving them everything, but I need you to know that I never meant for any of this to happen." "You never meant to get caught." "No, I never meant to hurt you, or Tess, or anyone." I looked at her standing there with her suitcases and her family photo, and for just a moment, I remembered why I'd fallen in love with her 20 years ago. Then I remembered the text messages, the lies, the months of gaslighting, and the feeling passed. "Alison, you made your choices. You chose Derek over me, you chose money over integrity, you chose crime over family. Now you get to live with those choices." "And you? What did you choose?" "I chose the truth, no matter how much it costs." She nodded and walked down the stairs, past me and out the front door. I watched through the window as she loaded her car and drove away, probably forever. Then I went back to my office and started preparing for the board meeting that would end this whole nightmare once and for all. The Meridian Industries quarterly board meeting was held at the downtown Marriott in a conference room overlooking the lake. I'd attended these events before as Alison's spouse, usually spending the evening making small talk with other executives' partners, while the real business happened at the main tables. This time was different. This time, I was wearing a wire and carrying the power to destroy half the people in the room. Agent Chen had coached me on conversation techniques designed to elicit admissions, ask open-ended questions, express sympathy for their difficult situation, let them assume I was just a concerned husband trying to understand what had happened to his marriage. Janet Morrison spotted me as soon as I walked in. She approached with the kind of forced smile that people use when they're not sure if they should acknowledge a family scandal. "Jack, I wasn't sure if you'd be here tonight, given everything that's been going on with Alison. I figured I should show my face one last time before the divorce is finalized. How are you holding up? This whole situation must be so difficult for you." "It's been educational. I'm learning all sorts of things about my wife's work that I never knew before." Janet's smile tightened slightly. "Well, you know how complicated corporate relationships can be. Sometimes people make poor decisions under pressure." "Is that what happened? Pressure?" "Oh, you know, the demands of the job, the need to meet targets, the temptation to cut corners. It's easy to see how someone might get in over their head." I nodded sympathetically. Alison mentioned that she had guidance from more experienced colleagues, people who helped her navigate the corporate culture. "Did she?" Janet's voice was carefully neutral. "She said someone taught her which vendors to prioritize, which contracts to fast-track. She was grateful for the mentorship." I'm sure she was. Across the room, I spotted Derek Hoffman talking to a group of executives near the bar. He looked confident, relaxed, like a man who believed he'd successfully managed a crisis. "Excuse me for a moment, Janet. I think I should say hello to Derek." "Jack, are you sure that's a good idea?" "Why wouldn't it be?" "Well, given the circumstances." "What circumstances? The fact that he's been sleeping with my wife, or the fact that they've been committing crimes together?" Janet's face went white. "Jack, I think maybe you should..." "Should what? Should pretend I don't know what's been going on? Should act like my wife just happened to stumble into a procurement fraud scheme without any help from her colleagues?" "Keep your voice down." "Why? Are you worried that people might overhear us talking about federal crimes?" "Jack, you don't understand the situation." "Then explain it to me. Explain how my wife went from being an honest HR director to being part of a multi-million-dollar embezzlement operation in less than 6 months." Janet grabbed my arm and pulled me toward a quiet corner of the room. "Listen to me very carefully. There are things about this situation that you don't understand, things that could be very dangerous for you to get involved in." "Dangerous how?" The people involved in this situation have a lot to lose, more than you realize. Are you threatening me, Janet? I'm warning you, for your own good, and for Tessa's good. What does my daughter have to do with this? She's a beautiful girl, Jack. Smart, successful, with her whole future ahead of her. It would be terrible if something happened to damage that future. The threat was subtle, but unmistakable, and it was exactly what Agent Chen had hoped to capture on the recording device. Janet, are you suggesting that my family might be harmed if I don't stay quiet about federal crimes? I'm suggesting that sometimes the best thing a man can do for his family is to mind his own business, and if I don't, then you might find that your business becomes everyone's business, including people you don't want to meet. I looked at my cousin, my father's sister's daughter, someone I'd known since childhood, and realized that I was looking at a stranger, someone capable of threatening my daughter to protect a criminal conspiracy. Janet, I want you to listen to me very carefully. I'm going to walk away from this conversation now. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to call the FBI and report everything you just said to me, and if anything at all, happens to me or my daughter, they'll know exactly who to arrest first. Jack, you're making a mistake. No, Janet, you made the mistake. I'm just making sure everyone knows about it. I walked away from her and headed straight for Derek, who was still holding court near the bar. Derek, good to see you. He turned around, and his face went through several expressions in quick succession: surprise, fear, confusion, and finally forced friendliness. Jack, I wasn't expecting to see you here. Where else would I be? This is my wife's company, at least until she gets fired for federal crimes. The executives around Derek suddenly found reasons to be somewhere else. Jack, maybe we should talk privately. Why? Are you worried about people overhearing us discuss your criminal conspiracy with my wife? You need to calm down. Do I? My wife has been lying to me for 6 months while committing federal crimes with you and my cousin. How calm should I be about that? Look, the situation with Alison got complicated, but... Complicated? Is that what you call fraud and embezzlement? Complicated? You don't understand the pressure we were under. From who? From Janet? Derek's eyes widened. What do you know about Janet? I know she's been running this operation for years. I know she recruited you and manipulated my wife, and I know she just threatened my daughter to try to keep me quiet. She what? You heard me, so here's what's going to happen, Derek. You're going to walk over to Janet and tell her that if anything happens to me or my family, the FBI will have recorded evidence of her threats. And then you're both going to turn yourselves in before this gets any worse. Jack, you don't know what you're dealing with. I know exactly what I'm dealing with. I'm dealing with criminals who thought they were smarter than they actually are. I pulled out my phone and showed him a text message from Agent Chen. We have everything we need. Thank you. Derek's face went completely white. You're wearing a wire. Was wearing a wire. Past tense. The FBI has what they need now. You son of a bitch. Derek, my wife chose to have an affair with you. She chose to commit crimes with you. Those were her choices. But threatening my daughter? That was Janet's choice. And now she gets to live with the consequences? I walked out of the conference room, leaving Derek standing there with the realization that his criminal conspiracy had just collapsed around him. Outside in the hotel lobby, Agent Chen was waiting with Agent Williams and 2 other federal agents. How did it go? She asked. Janet Morrison just threatened my daughter to try to keep me quiet about federal crimes. Derek Hoffman confirmed that she's been running the operation. You have everything on tape? Perfect. We'll move on the arrest tomorrow morning. What about Alison? She'll be arrested too, but as a cooperating witness, she'll likely get a much lighter sentence. And Janet? Janet Morrison is looking at 20 to 30 years in federal prison. I drove home through the quiet suburban streets, past the houses where normal families were living normal lives without federal conspiracies and criminal relatives and cheating spouses. When I got home, I called Tess at college to give her a heads up about what was going to be in the news tomorrow. Dad, is Mom really going to prison? Probably not prison, probably probation and community service. But yes, she's going to be convicted of federal crimes. And Aunt Janet? Aunt Janet is going to prison for a very long time. Dad, I'm so sorry. This must be horrible for you. You know what, sweetheart? It's actually not. For months, I felt like I was losing my mind, like I couldn't trust my own perceptions. Now I know I was right about everything. That's not horrible. That's liberating. What happens now? Now your mom faces the consequences of her choices, I get a divorce, and you and I figure out how to move forward as a family of 2 instead of 3. Are you going to be okay? I'm going to be fine. Better than fine, actually. I'm going to be free. After I hung up, I sat in my home office and updated my Tinder profile. Recently single. No liars, no criminals, no relatives of criminals. Must love data analysis and federal law enforcement. Then I poured myself a drink and watched the news, waiting for tomorrow's arrests to make everything official. At exactly 7 a.m., my phone rang. It was Agent Chen. We've arrested Janet Morrison, Derek Hoffman, and 2 other Meridian executives. Your wife turned herself in an hour ago with her attorney. How did they take it? Janet tried to claim she was being framed. Derek tried to blame everything on your wife. The other 2 confessed immediately and asked for plea deals. And Alison? She provided a full confession and complete cooperation. She'll probably get 2 years probation and community service. Good. Mr. Morrison, I want you to know that your cooperation made this case possible. Without your evidence and the recordings from last night, we never would have been able to prove Janet's involvement. Agent Chen, my wife destroyed my marriage and my cousin threatened my daughter. Helping you put them in prison wasn't cooperation, it was justice. 3 months later, I was sitting in a coffee shop downtown, reading about Janet's sentencing in the morning paper. 25 years in federal prison, plus restitution of $2.3 million. Derek got 15 years, Alison got probation and a felony record that would follow her for the rest of her life. The divorce was finalized the same day Janet was sentenced. I kept the house, the retirement accounts, and my self-respect. Alison kept her criminal record and the knowledge that she'd destroyed her family for a man who threw her under the bus the moment things got difficult. My phone buzzed with a text message from a woman named Sarah, someone I'd matched with on Tinder the week before. Looking forward to dinner tonight. Fair warning, I'm a federal prosecutor, so I have a thing for honest men. I smiled and typed back, perfect. I have a thing for women who prosecute criminals. As I walked home through the downtown streets, past the federal building where Janet would be transferred to prison tomorrow, I realized that revenge wasn't about destroying someone else's life. It was about making sure they couldn't destroy yours. And for the first time in 6 months, I felt like my life was entirely my own again.